Hi, welcome back to another Insider. We are continuing to talk about my holidays and all the linguistic aspects that I found while I was visiting Portugal. This week, I'm going to talk about something that I think I have mentioned before, but now I had the opportunity of actually witnessing it firsthand, which is the lack of books um, in correct Portuguese and how quickly um, everything was done in a way that all literature, all things that are actually done or books that were written in correct Portuguese. And when I talk books, I say books for school books, like didactic books, books that can be used for kids to learn, how quickly they were erased from the face of the earth. So now, when you want actually to teach your kids how to speak proper Portuguese, it is almost impossible to find a proper book. So come with me and let's see what I found. So, I think I have mentioned this before. It's something that I've been trying to deal with for quite a while, which is teaching my daughter Portuguese and finding books that she can read in Portuguese that are in correct Portuguese and not using that suppose agreement that the politicians in Portugal decided to cook up in a way of damaging not only the language but the culture of the country. So I've been trying to find these books with no success, and I thought that going to Portugal, visiting a few bookshops, I would eventually find something good. And I decided to start, and because that is a reference place, which is Livraria Bertrand. This is the oldest bookshop in Europe, so it's a landmark. Bertrand always been a landmark. Tourists all brave about it, and it's a beautiful place. Don't get me wrong. You just go there and you delve into the books. It's galleries and galleries and galleries. It's an old building. You go in and it's truly amazing. It's an amazing experience to visit that bookshop, and obviously something that I did enjoy doing. But when I was entering there, I quickly approached one of the staff, very friendly. I'm not going to say otherwise, and ask if there was any chances for me to find books that my daughter could read and they were still in correct Portuguese. To which he looked at me, obviously, and I said, well, when I say correct Portuguese, I say before that orthographic agreement that doesn't mean anything but damaging the language. To what he obviously said that there isn't, that all the books that are in the shop are with the new agreement. So, and I was rather disappointed because I think if we are going to really sell something and a place with the reputation that that place has, I think a place like that would be a place that would really care about the content of the books they sell. And at the moment, doing this, and I believe is damaging for not only the reputation, obviously, but for the language itself. This was something, and I really would like to know what political, economical, whatever interests are behind this, because it was definitely not the interest of the Portuguese people or the language for that matter, because obviously the outcome of this has been a disaster. I've mentioned this so many times, and I've done a lot of videos about this. But what I found is that the Portuguese politicians cook up something, and everyone is very prompt to follow that cook up. No creative thinking, nothing. Nobody ever questioned, is this the right thing? Are we actually doing the right thing? Is this of any benefit to the country, to the culture of the country, and for the language? Nobody did. Nobody did. Everything was done, and how quickly everything was, all these books were absolutely erased from the face of the earth. If you were in school before that and you still have ones hanging around at home, you are very lucky. You now have a relic that no one else can have. And this is wrong. This is wrong. In a democracy, in a country that calls itself a democratic country, its citizens should have the right of choosing what they want to do. And this is what I say, a masked democracy, because at the end of the day, the picture that they picture for foreigners, for everyone that visit Portugal, it's that they are a very democratic country, a very modern country. But in reality, its citizens are under a dictatorship worse than the one that they had a few decades ago. So they are forced to put up with something that is wrong. They are forced to read news that are incorrect. The language is incorrect. They are forced to speak a language that is not theirs. And if they try to say something about it, they are ignored. They simply put in the too hard basket and they don't count. So as I said, I am very disappointed with the situation. I've always been. I won't definitely I won't budge, and I won't change my opinion about this. I think more than ever it's very important that we stand together and we prove to these corrupt politicians that we are strong and that we are the citizens, and we do have a voice, and we do want our voice heard. So I'm using my channel. I've been using my channel to show my listeners, my followers, that why I'm not here just to advocate for something that I believe. I'm showing you why. I'm showing you the reasons why this is so absurd. And I've said this many times. I've got friends in the United States, and I've spoken to my friends in the United States, and I actually gave them an example, or as if out of a sudden their variant of English was forced upon the British people, and even they are Americans. They thought, well, that would be ridiculous, because it is ridiculous. It's not a question of whose language is or who's who. This is what I think the Portuguese politicians fail to understand. The Portuguese language is a language that was born in Portugal, is the language of the Portuguese. At the time of the colonization, that language spread all over the world, and several other countries started using it. Back then, because of the Portuguese influence and the Portuguese occupation. That occupation ceased to exist, but those countries were still using the language. But now that language was also theirs. They started adding their little bit to the language. And I've mentioned this before. Even while there was the occupation, there was also the influence of all these countries on all these cultures into Portugal and into the language whilst this occupation was still happening. And this was all the evolution of the language. Totally acceptable, totally natural, totally fine. When it's something, for example, if a word that came from one of the countries, either Brazil or Angola or Mozambique or Macau or any of the countries that use the Portuguese language, one of the words from those variants started being used in Portugal naturally, and that was the use, the Portuguese started using it like that, that would be perfectly fine. What is happening here, it's not that. It's that out of a sudden, they claim they want to unify a language, which again, it's another farce, it's another abhorrent situation, because you don't unify a language. Languages are, as we used to say, living beings. They constantly changing, and they are a reflection of a country's culture, of a country's reality. And each country, even though they may be speaking the same language or the same core language, each country suffers different influences. For example, Brazil suffers a strong influence from Central America, South America, and of course the United States. And Portugal would suffer the influence of all the European countries around it, and obviously a different influence. They also suffer influence from the United States, that has a lot or a very strong cultural influence everywhere or in every country, but of course it won't be as strong as, for example, in Brazil. And we can see that influence quite strongly when we see the variant, the Brazilian variant of Portuguese, and the Portuguese itself. So it's something that we have to accept. It's a natural thing, and it's a good thing. It's a good thing that there's all this difference, all this variety, all this culture coming into a language and making it so rich. So why unify it? So why limiting something that is so good? Why limiting? In fact, and I've said this already a few times, at this stage, the language in Brazil has evolved in a way that it would even be acceptable if they registered their own language as their own. And if just cut pathways, because if you see the evolution in both countries and the evolution of the language in both countries is very, very, very different. And a lot of words that you use in Brazil, you don't even know about them in Portugal, and vice versa. So we need to accept that. And the thing is that these politicians have absolutely no idea about languages, and quite frankly, they don't know anything about the Constitution of Portugal or anything about laws, because apparently, and a lot of lawmakers and a lot of lawyers and people who actually do understand of this claim that this obviously is unconstitutional. First of all, because this agreement was signed and passed in a motion in Parliament, whilst for it to be valid, it would have to be a law passed in Parliament. It would have to be made a law, so it would override the previous orthographic agreement that is obviously into a law. So a lot of lawmakers say that this is not even constitutional, that is not even legal, not valid, because it was not made into a law. So there's a lot of legal implications in this. There's a lot of things that I'm not going to delve into it, because I am not a lawyer, I'm not a lawmaker, so I don't want to be here talking about things that I might not be 100% informed about. But and I've said it and I've sent the link many times that all information is provided. I'll send the link below. It's a blog called O Lugar da Língua Portuguesa, the place of the Portuguese language. Is written in Portuguese, obviously, and all the information is there, and you can read the blog, and it provides you a lot of information. Obviously, it is in Portuguese, but I think these days with translators and even Google Translate. I know I'm a translator, and I shouldn't be saying this, but I think for things like this, sometimes is helpful. And this is what I found, is that Portugal at the moment lives like in a vacuum. There's obviously a lot of people that don't want to hear about this orthographic agreement. They don't care. They still write Portuguese the way it is, and they just disregard what these politicians were about. But then there's the other side, is that you buy a newspaper and you can't read Portuguese in a newspaper anymore. Books, you can't find books. You will find fiction books, and there's some books of authors that obviously refuse to use this orthographic agreement. But for the most vulnerable, and when I say this, I say the children, the school children, they have no choice. And I think it's appalling that a dictator government, a bunch of dictator politicians start the dictatorship by imposing something to the most vulnerable, and that's our children. As a parent, I'm here to make sure that my daughter will learn the language of Luís de Camões. So I think as parents, it's our duty to go against this and say, no, my child is going to learn the language as it is. The language as is spoken in Portugal, the language that reflects their culture and reflects the country where they were born. This is not it. This is something else that does not belong in Portugal, does not, quite frankly, belong in Brazil. It does not belong anywhere. Is a cook-up, is something wrong, something that is obviously has nothing to do with languages. It has to do with bad politics and bad politicians, and needs to be eradicated from the face of the earth, because it's just causing way too much damage. These days, not even they know how to apply the monster they created. If you read the Diary of the Republic, the Diary of the Portuguese Republic, you will find absurdities every day. They don't know how to apply the stupid rules they created. They have a paragraph with words written correctly. The next one, it's not. The next one is a mix. Some words don't exist in either of the rules. They just make it up as they go along, because this is what is happening at the moment. People don't know how to write. And because they don't know how to write, they are constantly second guessing themselves, and they make it up as they go along. And then the result is disastrous. You see things that you never thought possible. Yes, there was always typos, there was always spelling mistakes, that always existed. But with the intensity and the severity as we see today, every day, not only on social media, and I know social media is obviously not the best place to look for this, because we know that that's not the place to find things written properly. But in newspapers, you read newspapers, Portuguese newspapers, and it's every day. Every day you're going to find a mistake. Every day you're going to find something that you think, oh gosh, what is this? You watch TV and it's abhorrent. It's just it's horrible what you see, the way the language is. And then it's the disconnect between what you write and what you speak. even though they claim that this was to unify, to make it easy, so the language was written in the way that it was pronounced. Well, they failed miserably. When you say, and I gave that example in my last video, when you say espectadores, spectators, without the C, it becomes espectadores. So it's a different thing. So how do you pronounce it? If you take the C, it becomes another word that actually exists in Portuguese, becomes another word. So what do you say? Do you say that espectadores are in a show? Espectadores is someone that sticks something that, it's a sticker. It's something that it's a totally different thing. It's just not a spectator. It's not. So what do you do? If you say a fact, if you take the C, it becomes a fact, which is a suit, a business suit. So what do you read? This is what I mean. It's not just because they decided to change and they're unifying the language and it makes sense. It doesn't. It doesn't. It creates all sorts of nonsense. It creates all sorts of errors, all sorts of mistakes, and things that don't make sense. And this is one of them. You read things, you see something written, you don't even know what you're reading anymore because it doesn't make sense. When you're talking about a show, a TV show, a theater, something, and you call spectators, espectadores, it doesn't make sense. That word doesn't fit there. It does not belong there. Or when you're talking about a fact and you take away the C, out of a sudden you have a business suit in the middle of it. This is what I'm up against. Is just the reality of the ignorance, quite frankly, the ignorance of these politicians, the stupidity of creating something that is wrong, and even more so the stupidity of not acknowledging the error that they have made and correct it. That's something wrong. I seriously think it's sad for the children, for the generations of children. If I was living in Portugal, I would definitely make sure that my daughter's school would hear about this every single day. I would refuse my daughter to learn this. I would refuse, and if my daughter was marked for writing Portuguese correctly, I would go anywhere, including to the Department of Education. They cannot mark a student that has a fail for writing the language correctly, and I would not have that. I would not accept that. And I think as parents, we need to do something about this. It needs to start in some way. It needs to start somewhere. And I think as parents, we have that duty to our children. I'm not living in Portugal, but I'm doing my duty in that on that concern. I'm making sure that my daughter learns the Portuguese correctly. So if you are in Portugal, just don't let your kids to be dumbified. Teach them the Portuguese correct. Teach them how you write and read Portuguese. Don't let them become another product of this dictatorship that is invading Portugal, and they think they impose it, and eventually they can get away with it, but we are here. And as far as I'm concerned, until I am here, I will fight it. I won't apply it, and I will fight it basically until my last days, because I feel so strongly about this. I feel so strongly about the damage that this is causing that I cannot really just stay quiet and accept something that is really, really wrong. And I think Bertrand should also do something about it. I think the bookstores should also do something about this, because they also have some power. They are the ones who actually sell these books, and if they say no, we are not going to accept this. We don't accept this. This is not right. Um, the the resistance to this would become bigger and bigger, and at some point something would have to happen. So I think this is not a case of, oh, I'm not going to do anything, so I'm not going to change it, so I'm not going to say anything. No, it's exactly the opposite. We all need to say something. It's our duty. We all need to do something, and we all need to say something. Us as parents, bookstores, everyone who is implicated in this dictatorship needs to do something to change it, apart from voting, obviously, and voting in the right, in an alternative, in someone that will look at this and will look at the Portuguese and will start respecting the Portuguese, because at the moment the politicians that they have absolutely no respect for the people. They absolutely don't respect them. They just see them as numbers, and they keep them coming. Most of them don't vote because they want them to keep them the least informed possible, so they don't vote. They prefer them not to vote than if they vote for an alternative. That is why it's so important that people educate themselves politically, not just because of this orthographic agreement, of course not. For everything that is happening in Portugal, people need to open their eyes and start having a political consciousness and start to understand what's going on and change it. Because with a vote, you can change a lot of things. So join me, please. If you have children in school, just fight this. Just don't allow your children to be dumbified. If you go to a bookshop, just ask for books written in correct Portuguese, such as I did. If they start having more demand, and if they see that people are not buying because of that, maybe they too change their mind. And that's all for this week. I hope you like this video. It's a little bit of a video about what I found this month. I'm dedicating this month to all these things that I found in regards to orthographic agreement, and what I think and what I saw on this issue, because you all know that I'm a very strong advocate for the scrapping of this, because this is just ridiculous. But before I could say it, and I could see it from a distance. I could see from reading the newspapers online, talking to people who live there, seeing the horrible things that I read every day on social media, etc. But I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I wasn't seeing it with my own eyes. I wasn't seeing it in the population, in the people on their everyday life. And last month I had that opportunity. I had that opportunity to see it and see how this indoctrination is happening, and how subtle this indoctrination is being. They trying to introduce it, and the way they're doing it is so subtle, just to try to make people to start using it, so they then claim that this is the natural evolution of the language. Well, it's not. It is not. The Portuguese have been forced to do something that is not what they should be doing, and it's really damaging for their culture, for their country, for their language. And the result is in everyday life. Newspapers that have constant errors. That I haven't read one that didn't have them. Watching news, very sad. Everything. I still have to say, for those inspection centers in the north, well done to you. Keep going with the fight. Oh, and again, if you have any any place in your town, either an inspection center. I remember this again. I asked you last week on my first video, and I'm asking you again. If in your town or city you have a business that has a correct name and everything is spelled correctly, one of these inspection centers, the sign that it still has it correctly, please take a photo and post it. Let's show these politicians that there are still a lot of people that think they are just insane and they're not going to be indoctrinated by a bunch of corrupt politicians. So don't forget, if you have one in your town, your city, whatever, just take a photo and post it. Let's make a huge... I feel very sorry I couldn't do it, but as I explained last week, when I saw those signs, I was in the car and the car was moving. So I wasn't expecting it, obviously. So I was not ready to take the photo. And of course, when I grabbed the phone to take the photo, it would have already gone because the car was moving. So it was not easy. That's why I couldn't take a photo. But if you live in the town, I think it is easier for you because you can just go stand in front of the sign and take a picture. And obviously it's possible. I know there is a lot of businesses that are still written properly there. So let's go. Let's show everyone this is how you write Portuguese. So, and just a thing, RTP, if you want to speak Portuguese correctly, like you do say every morning on your shows, just please teach them the Portuguese correctly, not nonsense cooked by politicians. Just go and read the proper grammar books and the proper dictionary. Just a saying, because you know, you would say that the national TV channel, as RTP is, have the duty, is a public service, and at the moment they're not doing any public service. In fact, they are just being another accessory to this dictatorship, an accessory to these corrupt politicians in this indoctrination that is currently happening. So don't be fooled by what you see on RTP when they say they are trying to teach you how to speak Portuguese correctly. It may not be the case, so be aware. And this is my video for this week. I hope you like it. Once again, if you have any of these things going on, please take a picture and post it. I will be very, very happy to see it. And you know, put a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you get a notification of a new insider every week. Before I go, I would like to thank you all for watching. See you next week. Thank you. Bye.